I was 30 years old when I went to prison.
I was at the age of 19. I just turned 19.
Hi, I'm Chris, and I help life-sentenced men transition from institutionalized prison life back into society. Every one of our men has already served 25 to 45 years in prison. I serve on the board of the Corrections Transition Program at Everglades Correctional Institution in Miami, Florida. I teach these men life skills and how to speak, listen, and think, so when they get parole, they become assets to their communities rather than liabilities of the state. Welcome to Men Going Home. I'm Chris Wolfe, and we've got another great show for you today because we are the only show that brings you access to a segment of society very few people know anything about. Men who have spent more than 30, 35, and even 40 years in prison. We'll talk to them about their crimes, their life in prison, and what their transition back into the free world was like after all those years. However, before we welcome our special guest today, please welcome my good friend and co-host of this show, Andy Korge. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Hey, Chris. Good to be here. I'm real excited about this show. We have John right here to my right, John Eddings, that is joining us today. And we're going to learn a little bit about him and his plight and where he is today, and I'm excited about that. I reflected a little bit on our subject last week, Daryl Smith.
Daryl Smith, right.
And it reinforced, that show kind of reinforced to me something that I've long held close as it relates to prisons and people in jail and in prison in America. And a big segment of that population ends up there because of drug abuse.
Correct.
And it was pretty obvious talking to Daryl that that was really what got him into prison. And it's kind of a shame when you look at those types of situations that, they're not treating the drug abuse, the symptom, but they're treating the crime.
Correct.
And a lot. When I was listening and talking to Daryl, I thought to myself, man, if he could have beat the drug abuse way back when he was a teenager, he might not have spent all those years in jail.
No, Daryl was another example of a guy, a very nice guy, good parents who he made bad choices and bad decisions and got involved in drugs, and that was the root of his problem. And as you said, if they could have focused on that, perhaps he wouldn't have spent 2/3 of his life in prison.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that really resonated with me too was, we talked briefly about it with Daryl, but was the cutback in the budgets in the prison system in Florida and how that prevented him from continuing to get an education while he was in prison. So he's a smart guy. He was no dummy.
Well-spoken, intelligent man, but whenever there's cutbacks at the state budget, the first place they look is usually the Department of Corrections.
Yeah, and it was that was a little revealing to me as well, because we want these guys to get out of prison and become productive members of society. And I think that sort of inhibits that from occurring. So the one thing I was a little disappointed with Daryl, if I could say, when we asked him the question about, he said he never hurt anybody.
Correct.
And psychologically, if that woman who when he got caught sneaking in her house while she was there in the kitchen, I don't know, psychologically, he may have hurt her quite a bit.
Oh, correct. And Dr. Sheeran, who created the transition program, I believe if she heard him say that, she would be upset, because she would say, yes, somebody was hurt. You psychologically probably damaged somebody for many, many years. They may have never gotten over the fact that somebody was in their house, in their home.
But it turned out great for Daryl in that he got out. He's now becoming a productive member of society. He reunited with his daughter, who he lives with now, who's an upstanding member of our community. And, God bless his mother, who raised that daughter and made her the woman she is today. And now she's reinvigorating his life by allowing him to live with her.
Correct. It was a great show last week. Let's introduce this week's guest and get on with today's show. John Eddings spent almost 39 years in prison. He was convicted on 7 counts of armed robbery, 7 counts of kidnapping, 3 counts of aggravated assault, grand theft auto, and 2 prison escapes from Florida state prisons. He received 3 life sentences and 904 years in prison. After 25 years in prison, everything changed for him and he was paroled in 2013. He has survived over 38 years in some of the country's most violent prisons, and he is here today to tell his story. Please welcome my friend, John Eddings. Welcome, John.
Good morning. Good afternoon, both of you. Thank you.
John, so tell me, you're sitting in a prison 30 years ago. We're looking at 3 life sentences and 904 years. Did you ever think that you'd be sitting here today doing a live podcast in Miami?
No, not really. Everything was measured in my mind that I was going to die in prison someday, and what do I do with the time in between? But then, as we spoke a few days ago, there was a point in my life that I realized I had served enough time that the time part was right, but had I become a person that they would find acceptable? So I started getting hope towards the end, but during most of the time, it was like, that's where I was going to die.
John, as you and I talked and we interviewed, when I interviewed you, crime has been a part of your life since you were 8, 9, 10 years old. You were born in Illinois, you were raised in Columbus, Georgia, your family moved to Titusville, Florida. But when you were in Georgia, you were 8, 9, 10 years old, and you were already stealing lunch money from women's purses in church. You called yourself a scoundrel at that young age. Talk about that.
Well, don't ask me where it began in my life, but there are issues where I was a thief as a kid. I stole. And in the old days, the kids a lot of times put lunch money in the part of the desk there where the pens usually went, or pencils, and I would steal it sometime. So I'd go to the where we had lunch at and get an ice cream sandwich or something like that. I grew up in a church family. Another thing I share with you, I grew up in a Christian family. One grandparent taught Sunday school, 2 cousins taught it. One cousin played the piano in the services. A grandfather was a deacon in the church. I had an uncle that sang in the choir sometime, and an aunt that, before I remember, used to play the piano organ. That's the family I grew up in. But a lot of times I would act like I had to use the restroom, and I would walk there, and then I would cut over to where the choir room was, where the women would leave their purses. I would pilfer the purses and go out the store, go to the old country store down the street, get a soda, then come back. And I just never really recognized what I was doing wrong. It's just what I did.
A lot of times over the 13 years I spent at Everglades Correctional Institution with the Corrections Transition Program, and people on the outside say, "Are these guys all come from broken homes, broken families?" You didn't. Your father had a job at NASA. Your mom was a homemaker. You had 2 wonderful sisters, and you called yourself the proverbial black sheep of the family.
That's a very good description, because I did have this wonderful family, and our family is fairly large, spread out, and you will find that I'm the only person that did any of the things like what I did. I mean, we've had a couple getting some skirmishes, minor things, but I was the only person in the entire family that ever did anything like this.
But 12 years old, you're living in Titusville, Florida. This is interesting because you said this is where peer pressure, and so many of the men in the program talk about how peer pressure affected their lives. And you said at the age of 12, you felt out of place. You were stealing alcohol and cigarettes to give to kids at the bowling alley for acceptance. And you said that peer pressure had a big effect on your life at that point.
Well, that's true, because what happened was we had moved from Columbus, Georgia to Titusville, Florida. My dad took the job at NASA working with the space program. And I'd gone from 6th grade in elementary school in Columbus, Georgia. Then we moved to Titusville, Florida. I was in junior high. And I'm in a new community where I didn't know anybody, didn't know the people I'd grown up around that I was used to. So I was looking for ways to fit in. And it just so happened that literally 1 block from where we lived was the shopping center where the bowling alley was, and the so-called cool kids, that's where they hung out. And back then, this was before marijuana or any of the other things had been introduced to us at that level. And drinking beer and wine was the thing, and smoking the cigarettes. And the way I found to fit in is I learned how to steal. Like, they had one shopping center on the side of the street, one on the other, and that's where we had the big brown bags with the name of the grocery store on the bag. So I'll go in the food fair over here with the empty, get one of their bags, take the empty bag blown up like it was full of something, go to the Winn-Dixie across the street, fill it up with beer and wine, and then walk out, because he walked in with this, he walked out with it. And I steal the cigarettes and lighters. And the kids I hung out with, most of them were a little bit older, but they allowed me to hang out with them.
Right.
And I didn't realize then that it was just all they cared about. Here's this kid that got us this booze and stuff for free, but it made me feel like I was one of the.
Right.
And it was a new community you were living in, so
Exactly.
you wanted to gain
Right.
that acceptance.
Right.
But John, what's interesting is that you talk about when you're stealing lunch money from kids in school and then going through purses at the church, but your crime escalation is pretty fascinating over the years, because now you're 13 or 14 years old, Easter 1967, Daytona Beach, you get arrested for the first time. And then shortly after that, you get arrested for joyriding on a stolen motorcycle,
Right.
and you're sent to the Florida School for Boys.
Well, actually, the way it went was that I had run away from home a lot. That's one thing you left out. That I ran away from home so many times. Sometimes I actually ran away from home. The other times, it was when I was hanging out with the kids. I stayed out so late. I figured if I'm going to get punished when I go home, I might as well make it worth it for the trouble and just stay 2 or 3 days. They'd be so glad to see me when I come home. The punishment wasn't as bad.
You know, it's funny. John's a very intelligent guy, because I know him from the prison. We met in 2007 when I first went to the program.
Yeah.
And he's a very intelligent guy, because I created an outline and went over a few things with him, and he noticed I left something out, because he did run away. But actually, what was interesting is you ran away twice when you were young in Georgia, and then you ran away over 30 times in
Right.
Titusville.
That's correct. But what happened with the thing in Daytona, it was actually during one of these spring breaks. I didn't know what it was, but I went there. I spent a whole week up on the beach, and there was actually some Christian students who allowed me to hang out in their hotel room. And then when they all went back to the different states on the Sunday, Saturday, or I think it was a Saturday, correct? So I'm just walking on, I guess it was US 1, and I was smoking a cigarette, and a police officer pulled, who the heck are you? We're just smoking. And next thing you know, I'm in the juvenile home in Daytona Beach overnight, and my parents
Right.
came pick me up the next day. But then it was just a short time after that, I was joyriding on a stolen motorcycle, and I went to the juvenile home. Then I spent, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months in the juvenile home, and then they sent me to a boys ranch in Palatka, Florida, called Roadhaver's Boys Ranch.
But wait a minute, hold on. Now, but you were at a juvenile home, and while you're there, you got caught stealing cigarettes out of a secretary's purse. Now,
Well, no, that was at reform school.
okay, but jump ahead to reform school.
Okay.
You're there, you get caught stealing cigarettes out of a secretary's purse,
Correct.
and you get physically beaten 5 times. Back when this became, you're not supposed to be doing that.
Right.
They're not supposed to be beating
Right.
you. And then they actually got rid of you because they realized you could become a PR problem for
Right.
them, correct?
That's my belief in what happened. See, well, actually, the 5 times back then, it was like they would have what they call ADJ, the Adjustment Center. And if you've ever been to a barber shop and seen that leather strap on the side of the chair where they sharpened the blades with,
Oh, yeah.
they had a strap like that with a handle on it. And there was a bed, just a regular twin bed, single cot. And they would make us lay on that bed and hold the handle like this and face the wall. And they would actually beat us, and they'd come like a hatchet on, they're cutting wood with one hand, just come way down and hit us in our butts with it. Now, the 4 times I got that like that. And but the 5th time he's talking about was when a friend of mine and I got caught stealing some cigarettes, and we were punished with the same whip, but standing up in the director's
Right.
office. And
Okay.
after that, that's when the issue came out.
All right, now, December 1972, you're 18 years old, you just get released from a co-ed reform school.
Correct.
And you, all right, the Allman Brothers, Southern Rock is really big. You moved to Macon, Georgia. You're working construction,
Right.
and you're doing drugs, LSD, you're doing everything, you're drinking, and you decide, I need to do a couple of robberies.
Here's what happened was that I was only there a couple months, but I was working construction during the day, and the popular bar to go hang out was Grant's Lounge. And I would go there, get high, get drunk. I played the harmonica, so I'd wait till the last set, play with the bands, step in, come home. So I'm coming home every night at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then get up first thing in the morning to go work. And pretty soon I realized something had to give, and I didn't want the partying to give. So I gave up the job. Now I'm trying to figure out, well, how am I going to supply what I'm doing? And I'm not a good drug salesman because I'm my best customer. So I remember from the things I learned in reform school were some of the kids that actually been there for armed robberies.
Right.
So I got a gun and I started robbing people.
All right.
Can I take a half a step back?
Go ahead.
Throughout this, so you're 18 years old. Your parents were, your dad working at NASA, your 2 sisters, good students, etc.
Right.
What were they going throughout this period of your teenage years, adolescent years?
Well, I don't know the exact details of my sisters. I know they went through a lot of stuff because they were, as my parents were going through all their fear and everything between running away from home, reform school, juvenile home, jails and stuff. They go through what anybody would imagine a parent would go through. But then my sister was kind of like in the corners, just having to suffer it in a quiet zone, kind of.
Yeah, they're innocent bystanders,
Right.
just watching it all happen.
And so they grew up. I can't think of the right word, but it was tough for them. And of course, later as an adult, when I'm in prison, it got a lot worse. But I know more about things now. We talked about what you were talking about earlier, where Daryl didn't understand that he was victimizing people.
Right.
But I understand now that I victimized my sisters, my parents, and everything around me, that they were going through things. Even now, I can't understand everything they went through, but I know that I put them through living hell.
And they were incredibly supportive people. I know your father passed away
September 10th last year.
Right, and your mom's still alive.
Correct.
But they were tremendously supportive people. For 38 years, they visited John on a regular basis.
Right.
Now, hold on. December of 72, because now, actually last week was the 48th anniversary that you started robbing.
Right.
And that was and your first robbery was in Gainesville, Florida. So what happened was...
Actually, my first robbery was in...
February of 73.
It was in Atlanta, Georgia, but I didn't get a call for that when I came. My first robbery was down here in Miami Springs, and then went up to...
Okay. But but in February of 1972, there were 2 robberies, and then 2 attempted escapes from county lockup. And you said you were strung out on getting high, you were gambling, and then you received a sentence. You were actually convicted. That was the first time you went to prison, and you got basically 3 15-year sentences to be served concurrently, correct?
Close. First, I got a 15-year sentence in Gainesville in 1973, not 72.
Okay.
And then a year or so later, they brought me down to Dade County to face the other robberies and assault. So I got a 15-year sentence running concurrent with the other one, and then a 5-year sentence running concurrent with it. They have it wrong on the paper. It says 3 15s, but it was 2 15s and a 5.
Yeah, because I pulled John's record up from the Department of Corrections, and he was correcting every detail. He knew everything. Yeah. All right. So now, so now you're in prison, but 5 years later, June of 1978, you actually pull off your first escape from Florida State Prison from DeSoto Correctional Institution.
Right.
I mean, that's hard to escape from a prison. So how did you escape from DeSoto Correctional Institution?
I climbed over the control room. As I explained to you.
What time of day? Morning, noon?
No, it was probably about 5 o'clock in the morning, give or take. And what happened was, this is a facility that the buildings are still there today. They're just not being used. But it had been used for some kind of service base at one point. A facility had been used, I think, for a mental health thing. And these dorms did not have bars on them. They had just regular screens, so it was easy to get out of them. But what they did around the perimeter, instead of having guard towers, they had 2 fences in the middle of. There's a sensory thing called paraguard. So if somebody stepped on the ground, it would send an impulse to the control tower, and it would show them that somebody was at a certain spot. But what they had failed to do is over the control room in the middle to put any kind of sentries around it. So I went through the window, made my bed up so like somebody was in it. So when they counted, they thought I was there, and then I climbed over the control room.
But there was no barbed wire? There was no barbed wire on the control room?
Actually, I can't remember exactly what. There was some leading up to it, but not over the center of it.
Right.
The crazy thing was that when I stood up on top, I'm listening to the count being radioed in below me, and I stood up, and the light cast a shadow about 100 feet long on the parking lot. And I said, "Oh gosh, here we go." But he didn't see it.
Well, they must have made that correction based on your escape, because all the control rooms now have barbed wire all the way across them.
Well, I'm sure I contributed to a few things.
All right. So then you escape. You escape. You go on a 2-day crime spree, which ultimately leads to five kidnapping convictions, 4 robberies, and 1 aggravated assault. You were sentenced to an additional 815 years. What happened?
They, as far as robberies go, they were kind of petty. Here's something else I want to, before I say anything, I want to make sure this is understood. even though I didn't hurt anybody physically, I realized I hurt people. And I had 2 trials, actual trials in my history after that escape and the next one. And all the victims basically said that under circumstances, he treated us great. But I understand now that I put them through some things that they may still be suffering with all this time later.
Right.
But they were small robberies. And because the way it works with the kidnapping charge, if you're in a building and if I move you from the living room to the bedroom, that's kidnapping going from one room to the next. So we were in cars and we moved from one spot to another, and that constituted the kidnappings. And so there were 5 kidnappings, 4 robberies, and an assault case, and there was no actual physical assault, but because I held the knife to somebody, that constituted the actual assault, and that was 815 years.
You know, Andy, the conversation I had with John was fascinating to me, because I said to him, like, if I'm looking at your file, you're out of control. I mean, you're just committing crimes with reckless abandon, no regard for consequences at all. Like, what was going on in your life? And what John said, and I want you to talk about this, he said, look, I wasn't even thinking about ever getting out of prison. I was just doing drugs. I was waking up, doing drugs, hustling, making money. I wasn't even thinking about getting out of prison. You said I was just wrapped up in the madness of prison. Talk about that.
That's true. I mean, I can't remember everything I thought of back in those days. And it's not like I never thought about wanting to be home or something like that. But as far as doing the right thing by decent behavior to get out, to work towards that, that was not in my makeup. It was just, all I thought about was like you, Chris, I get high, I pay my bills, find money to pay for this dope, to gamble, to whatever it was that was going on in my life. That was my life. And it may not be as easy for everybody to understand. But even though I was incarcerated and I suffered the part about being deprived of society, I still had fun in there because I was gambling. I was a hustler. I did things. There was some kind of interest and excitement in my life, and that's what I lived for.
All the vices you like to do were available in prison.
I'm glad you brought that, because I shared this with Chris earlier. Now, I remember one time I went back to reform school. I was in reform school 3 different times, and I was returned for my incorrigibility. That's what I was really good at, being incorrigible. But when I got to prison, I'm this young kid. You know, I'm by 19 by the time I got there, and the adults in my life, the ones that surrounded me, encouraged me to be incorrigible, and they taught me how to be more incorrigible. So I found myself in a heaven of sorts.
You became a better criminal. You said when you went to prison, they taught you things and you got better. Like what? Cheating at cards?
Actually, I had a cell partner that told me that this is how he taught himself to cheat. He learned certain things, how you deal off the bottom, how you do a fake shuffle, how you stack them so you get the cards lined up. And what he would do, he'd put a mirror in front of himself, and when he could do it without catching himself, that's how he did it. I didn't practice like he taught me how to do it. As soon as I got out of, I went from there back to DeSoto Correctional Institution. I'd been there twice, and one of the first things I did was get in a poker game and start doing it.
Trust you about as far as I can throw you, right?
Actually,
I know.
Maybe not that far.
All right. So how did they catch you? You've escaped from DeSoto Correctional Institution. You make it to Fort Myers. How long did you get out?
I was only about 5 days. The crazy thing was that I had, and this just shows you. Actually, let's go back to another term. I told you back then I was young, dumb, and stupid.
Right. And stayed that way.
And stayed that way. And this is one of the stupid moments. I had a stolen car, and then the car that had been used in one of the robberies, and I left the victim somewhere else, tied up loosely in the woods somewhere, and drove back in their car to where I had the stolen one.
Right.
And the knife that I had been using had been left in that car. And I said, well, just let me go back to that car and pick it up. But the police had found the car, and they said, well, maybe he'll come back. And I did, and they were waiting on me.
All right.
So, young, dumb, and stupid.
Yeah. So they pick you up in '78. Fast forward 2.5 years, you're back in prison. you either fake something or you, for some reason, you're up in Gainesville. They take you to Shands Teaching Hospital in Gainesville. Andy and I were students at the University of Florida. He remembers this incident. I don't. You go to the hospital, you take hostages, and you escape again. What went down there?
Well, the thing was, when I escaped in 1978, I really didn't have to escape. It was a choice. But from that point, when I got all that time, I felt like I didn't have a choice. I'm always looking for an avenue, from some way to do it. But I was a junkie. I was shooting dope in there, and I missed a vein, hit the artery, and they had to rush me to Shands Teaching Hospital.
Oh, okay.
Then I had to go back later for follow-up things, and I knew when those were going to be. And in planning for the last one, I hit a knife blade in the sole of my shoe and took it with me. And the crazy thing was that it'd been in this arm, and they'd had to put a wrap thing on my hand. So even though I didn't need it anymore, I kept it there, so they couldn't put the handcuff on me. And so I was able to get my hands free. And I'm not proud of this, but what I did do is I before I left the doctor appointment, I put the knife on the doctor, convinced the guard to forfeit his gun, got the keys to the state van, handcuffed the guard, and we left in the state van. I took the doctor hostage.
Right. So you're on.
And he was a young intern doctor, right? He was
he was not intern. He was a real deal. A real deal.
So you guys all get in the van and you take off now. I mean, there's roadblocks set up, right?
Well, actually, they didn't know where I went, but we went because I am somewhat familiar with the territory, because the reform school I've been in was in Trenton, Florida, which is not far from Gainesville. I went that direction to try to find something. And then as it got dark, I did get on the phone with somebody, and he was in Jacksonville, and he said that he would help me. We had to figure out how to get to Jacksonville. So we were taking all the back roads, and from Fort White going towards Lake City, a police car recognized the van, and he got behind us. And so I'm looking in the rearview mirror, and I'm realizing that it's going to be a matter of time.
Mm-hmm.
So and the doctor was driving. I told him, so when the lights hit, pull to the side of the road, but not so close to the fence where I can't get out. He did that. I jumped the fence while the police officer was shooting at me. And that's how I ended up in the woods that night.
Such a criminal mind. I mean, I wouldn't even think, right? You were like driving, your friend was driving behind you, and so it's close.
No. Oh, you're talking about the next episode.
Okay, yeah. This is when they were driving behind you, so that nobody could see your driver's license. They couldn't see the driver, the license plate.
Not this night. We're talking about the next episode.
Okay. All right. Well, wait a minute. Let's back up then, because wait a minute. So you're on the run. You at some point you evade a traffic block, correct?
Well, this is one we just talked about where I jumped out. They were setting it up ahead, but then the officer behind us actually turned the lights on too early, and when he did, I jumped out. And
then what happened? The van crashed or something? Or?
No, the doctor drove it close enough to the fence on the side of the road, because Florida's flat. It's in the ditches. There's no big deep. So he drove there. I jumped out, climbed the fence, and I'm going this direction here, trying to get away from. And there's a road going like this. Right before I got to it, that's when all the guards and officers started going down this road and blocked me off. So I came back to where I just came from, trying to figure out what to do. And eventually, I just waded through where all the guards were and just took my chance of going through them and went back towards Fort White.
The plan is you're going to fly to Canada, but that plan gets tripped up, and you end up taking a bus to California, correct?
Yes, but you left part of it out.
Which part?
Okay, because what I did the next night, I did go back to Gainesville, and I did kidnap this lady coming out of the hospital, and she tried to be another doctor from out of the mall. She was trying to be another doctor from the same hospital. I let her go the next day, and I had her car, and I was driving to Alabama, and some friends there were going to put me on a plane to Canada. But what happened was, as I was telling them that when they came to the bar to pick me up, I stepped down, twisted my ankle real bad, and that's when they were following me real close so nobody could see the tag. But I was in so much pain, I pulled off to a place to get some coffee, and then when I got back in, I remember having driven a car in years and didn't have much experience before.
Right.
So, and that's when I overran the red light, and then the police happened to be right at the corner, and they started following me. and I ended up jumping out of the car. When they turned their lights on, drove the car off the side of a hill and jumped out of it.
Gotcha.
Through the night.
Okay, so no, I'm just trying to move
Right.
because we got a lot of ground to
Right.
cover. So so you get rid of that car, but you're planning to fly to Canada. You can't fly to Canada. You end up taking a bus to San Francisco, correct?
Correct. To California, correct.
And then what happened in California?
But on the way out there, because I was on a bus, this married couple who were Marines at 29 Palms, they would come back there. I was at the 3 wide seat. Everybody gave it to me because they saw I was messed up. And they would come back there to smoke. And I can't remember what I told them about who I was and stuff. But they said, well, you can come recuperate at our house. So I recuperated there for about 3 or 4 weeks. And then started heading towards the Bay Area.
And they had no idea who you were. They had no idea you were escaped from prison.
I may have been young, dumb, and stupid, but I wasn't that stupid. I didn't tell them.
But now, while you're out there, at some point, you're hitchhiking,
Right.
and a nice woman picks you up,
Right.
and you marry her.
Correct.
Talk about that.
Well, when I left them, I started going to the Bay Area, and people today don't realize how often people hitchhiked back then. And just when you look at how everything crimes I committed, I had to be really even super stupid to be hitchhiking. But when I got to Fresno, this lady picked me up and gave me a ride to the Bay Area, and she did give me her business card. So in later time, when I did get established a little bit better, I contacted her. We got to know each other, and eventually we did get married.
Did she know of your past at all?
Of course not.
How long are you? How long were you married?
Not very long. I think we got married in August or October, and then May of the next year was when I had to leave town, and eventually got caught and came back to prison.
Wait a minute. Yeah, let's talk about how you got caught, because apparently you were still addicted to drugs in California. Right. You needed money. Another armed robbery.
Right. Well, what happened was that I was doing decently for a long time, but I hung out at the bar most of the time, and sooner or later I did start getting high on more than marijuana and beer, and I started shooting the cocaine, and I got strung out shooting it. And then I started just doing whatever it took to get the money.
Right.
And I did, even though we hadn't talked before, I did rob somebody in that area, a couple of people. But then I had destroyed my relationship with my wife, destroyed everything in that area. And I was actually on my return back to Florida with somebody.
Right, but wait, before that, you on your way to Florida, you stop in El Paso.
I stopped in Fresno.
Fresno.
And robbed somebody. But then we had a car accident in El Paso.
Gotcha.
And the next day I tried to get the car fixed with the credit card that came from the robbery.
Mm-hmm.
And they that's before they are now, where they know right away about stuff. Yeah. So I took the chance, and that's how they found out that I was involved with the robbery in Fresno, but they still didn't know how I was. I stayed in that jail for a while, went to 2 different fingerprints, and eventually I was extradited back to Fresno, went through a fingerprint there, and just about worked my way out of the jail when they figured out who I was.
John, what's fascinating, what I want Andy to hear, because this is just never ending, it's just craziness. This was all over about a 6.5-year period of time. John spent many years in prison, but all of this crime was done over about a 6.5, 7-year period of time. So they pick you up in El Paso, send you back to Fresno, right, which really saved your life. Correct. Because you were on your way to Florida.
Correct.
For what? We
were on our way to Florida to help somebody escape from prison. We were going to rent a helicopter, but then take the pilot hostage, have him fly into the prison grounds to pick him up, and then fly out.
Wait, hold on.
And this was Union Correctional Institution, which, well, maybe
maximum security prison.
Maximum security.
So the plan was to land a helicopter inside the prison and break someone out?
Correct.
Yes.
And did you think maybe that they would just shoot upon the...
Well, see, you need to understand that I had lived there for a few years, so I knew the layout. I knew the exact spot. I knew where the blind spots were. So if it's not without risk, but I knew where to fly in and to pick up and to fly back out.
You knew the way to do it with the best chance of success.
Correct. That doesn't mean I was successful, but I was young, dumb, and stupid.
But the fact that you got picked up in El Paso saved your life, because there's a good chance you would have been shot and killed.
Actually, I don't think so. But
no?
That's besides
landing a helicopter.
But what we did talk about though the other day is that I am a free man now. But had I done that, they would have never agreed to allow me to be free. So even if I had got out of it safely, I would have never had a life again.
Yeah, because John he's not on parole anymore. He is totally a free man now.
Right.
So, all right. So you get caught. They sent you back to. Now you're back at Florida State Prison. You're back at Florida State Prison. This is about 1983, correct?
Yes. I stopped thinking about
Was Ted Bundy still alive then? 83?
No, I meant to look up his execution date. No, he was still alive because with the close man, when I had visits, death row went to the same visiting part. And although I've never talked to him or anything, I've seen him many times. But I did want to add this on my share the other day that I was in Florida State Prison when he was executed. And I can remember that just a few days before then, I read in the newspaper where a former girlfriend was asked how she felt about it. And she says, I have no problem at all with it because he has ceased to serve any purpose in the universe. Mm-hmm. And when I read that, I said, John, even though you did not commit the crimes that he did, you don't serve any purpose in the universe. Mm-hmm. The only purpose you serve is that guards get paid to keep society safe by keeping me locked up and feed their families. I wish I could tell you that was how my life got turned around. It didn't, but it was something I always remembered. And from that point, this point, I realized I can tell you now, I have life insurance. I plan for cremation, not a regular burial. But if I had if this was my tombstone, I wanted to say he served a purpose. I do not want to be like Ted Bundy or other like him, or like I used to be.
So when you were brought back to Florida, they obviously they resentenced you again for a number of crimes committed for your escape. So that time now you get 3 life sentences
and 45 years
plus another 45 years.
And
so that was
in
1983.
California, I got the 7 years for the robbery there.
Right.
And then later I got 2 more years for a weapon that was actually after another violent thing. And that's how it came up to 904 and 3 life sentences.
All right. So let's talk about, we've got some time left. Let's talk about your life in prison now. Now, Andy, it's 1983. He's back to Florida State Prison up in Stark, Florida, correct?
Right.
How many total escape attempts did you try? I counted 11 or 12.
Well, actually, see, when I was in jail, here's what happened. When I got arrested, I didn't know I could get a life sentence for robbery. So when the detectives told me that, first thing I'm thinking about, shoot, I got to go because I ran away from home all those times. I ran away from reform school 12 times over the thing. So it was the natural thing for me to do is just leave. So we took a guard hostage, threw him in a cell, but we didn't get out of the jail. So then they transferred, that was an escape. Then they transferred us to the county jail. I escaped from there. It was going about a month. They brought me back. I escaped again. It was going about 7 minutes before they caught me. Then I pulled another attempt that they found out about. And then there was 2 more attempts they didn't know about. Then when I went to prison, there was 2 escapes they know about, but there were at least 3 other attempts they didn't know about. That just they failed before I could do it.
But I counted about 11 attempted, but 2 successful from county lockup and 2 successful from state prison, correct?
Right. So I don't know if I got all the numbers right, but there were a lot of them.
What was your life like now? You're settled into Florida State Prison. What was your life like at Florida State Prison in 1983?
Well, I was on close management. That's Florida's version of long-term solitary confinement for 4.5 years. And as crazy as it sounds, you can actually find a comfort zone in your little closet.
Really?
And so here's what you do. You find a life. You read a lot of books. You write. You find things to do. And because these were the concrete walls with the steel bars in the front like you generally see on TV, and there's 3 floors of it, there's people hollering and talking all night long, and they play chess. We learned how to play chess by hollering the moves up and down. So if you had 3 o'clock in the morning, people playing chess, there's only certain windows where you get sleep. We learned how to do a lot of things. We learned how to gamble with a guard game called Georgia Skin with people on a different floor. There's different things to do. And that's what we did. You learn how to exercise in your cell. I built a lot of a life. You look for pen pals, building a life like that. I could read a novel in a day a lot of times. That's
how do you think you survived almost 39 years in prison? How did you survive that? Because there's so many ways you can get killed or die.
Well, here's the thing. I can tell you this, that I'm not going to take anybody to church right here, but I always knew that for me to be a free man again, or to live through it, it was going to take a miracle like Moses at the Red Sea with that do anything stick. And if I was ever released, I was always going to give God credit for what happened. That is what happened. I do believe I was looked out for. I can tell you a lot of reasons why God did do that for me. I know my mother has calluses on her knees for all the prayer. I can tell you a lot of different things. I can tell you now that I have a decent life. I believe that I was saved so I could live this life. But I did not do it. I did not survive because I was a heroic, brave person and knew how to fight great or anything. I'm just a walking miracle.
Can I take a half a step back here for a second?
Mm-hmm.
You tried to escape from prison all these times and were successful several, which is unbelievable.
Amazing.
It's amazing. Are there a lot of other guys in prison that are looking for ways to escape like that? Or were you kind of unique in that regard?
We have a few. There's only two that really had the courage to try it. And I say that because I'm really a coward in a lot of areas, but that was just one of the areas that I would just do it.
And that was also 41 years ago. I wonder if they've really, closed some of the holes and locked things down more.
They have closed some. See, I can sit there and tell you now ways to navigate the razor. I remember one guy, his nickname was Renegade, who just climbed over, just threw the blanket over and just walked through it and just let himself get cut up through the razor wire. So if you determined to do it, you're going to do it. And the math I always used, if you had a 50-50 chance to succeed, it was worth the investment.
How would you describe to the average person what prison is like, you're living in a community of men, thousands of men, for years and years? How would you describe to the average person what that's like?
Well, here's the thing. It has changed a lot in recent years, and I have been absent for years. And I could hear some of the stories about it because, like, before I went to California on my consecutive sentence at the end, I'd never been in an environment with all these gangs. I went out to California, they had the real gangs. And then now have them in place in Florida. And while they're real, they're not real like the real ones in California. And I could tell you all the different stories if we had time about how I validate what I'm saying. But there's a lot of petty things now. There's this K2 that drives people nuts, smoking and stuff. There's just so many differences between them. But the thing is, you can develop a life in there. Some of the closest family I have are the men I did time with.
And you keep that bond today?
I'm part of a nonprofit organization called Ephesians 428 Ministries, and two of the men on that board I did time with, two men Alan Shepard and Michael Wolfe.
Yeah, the Corrections Transition Program is a very tight, loyal organization, and everybody's very loyal to each other, and they have a network, and a lot of the men are watching now as we speak. John, did you ever fear for your life in prison?
Sure I did, especially when I first went in, but there were other moments. Listen, I haven't won a fight since 1969. I've lost a lot in between, so it's easy for me to get scared.
Right. And Andy, we talk about his escapes. I believe, didn't some writer at a newspaper, there was an article written they called you the modern day Houdini, and another one called Escapee Escapes and Escapes Again.
Yeah,
who wrote
73.
Those? They're just newspapers?
Yeah, they're in Gainesville Sun.
Gainesville Sun? All right. Now, here's another thing. Now, we can start to transition into your transition out of prison. But I made a note here, and you mentioned it earlier. You describe yourself as young, dumb, stupid, and I stayed that way. I just got tired of it. And that fed into Dr. Regina Sheeran's theory on you just aged out, correct, on crime?
That's her description. She says you just get old and just get tired of it. To me, I think more descriptive and better. I just got tired of beating my head up against the wall. You can only spend so much time in there without a life to just not learn something from it. I wish I could tell you that you were talking earlier about the different educational things. When I first went into prison, you could actually, at the Rock, UCI, you could get a college degree for free, AA. And there's so many things that were available to you now that you can't even come close to now. And I did not have sense enough to take advantage of it.
Yeah. All of our guys at the Corrections Transition Program, a lot of these guys got life sentences in their late teens, early 20s. Now they're 50, 60. And it's true. They've just aged out on crime. Crime is generally, as Dr. Sheeran says, a young man's activity. These guys just want to get on with their life and live a life. And that's what happened with John.
It's just I wonder, was there just one instance in something that happened in your life that developed a change inside of you? Because, you've been, since you were very young, committing these crimes for a long period of time. And was there something that occurred that was life-changing, an experience, or
This was
something that got you sort of...
the potential knife fight, correct?
Well, actually, something I was thinking about what he was saying. What happened was they have a tool called interstate compact that if you have, for instance, if you have parole in California, you want to move to Florida, you have to get permission for the interstate compact to transfer your parole to the other state. That happened with me when I got out of prison in California with consecutive sentence. It took me 10 months to return back to Florida. But interstate compact also allows you to sometimes serve your time from this state in another state for the different ways that you can qualify for it. And I ended up qualifying for it in 1990 to go back to California, but to serving Florida time in California. And I was there 7 years. And towards the end of it, I got picked up in a trafficking case, trafficking dope in the prison. I was in the lockup situation, getting ready to go to their version of CM. They call it SHU, Segregated Housing Unit, and just said SHU. And as I was getting ready to go to the lockup, I was actually doing something, and a black guy outside the cage gave me a cigarette, and I could smoke it. And one of the white guys saw me. You cannot smoke behind someone of another race. You can't not do anything in that state. It's very strict. And it created a situation I thought was going to blow up real bad. I remember praying at that time. I said, God, get me out of this alive. I'll never turn my back on you again. And in a very left-handed way, that's exactly what happened. But for the next 7 years, I'd read my Bible in the morning. I'd go to church, but I still ran a poker game. I still did this. I felt like that since I'm never getting out of prison, I lived by a different set of rules. So for the next 7 years, I did have a kind of a better life, but a different one. But then when I did return back to Florida in 1997, and for the next year, I just was back at Florida State Prison, and I was the worst prisoner in the state. I'm just navigating whatever's in my way. And then in July, I don't know the exact date, but in July of 98, a close friend of mine got into an argument with somebody, and I felt like it was going to, the next day, it was going to be a knife fight where somebody could get hurt or killed, or at least they would get locked up. And I remember praying, I said, God, I don't want nobody to get hurt. Nobody goes to jail. And I just felt like God told me, listen, what have you done for me lately? I didn't hear a voice in my heart. I felt like I heard it. I says, I'm living the best. I'm not praying for me. I'm praying for somebody else. He said, okay, but what have you done for me lately? I felt like I heard silence on the wires, and I just felt like God told me, I've let you straddle this fence too long. You can either get on this side or you can get on that side. Mm-hmm. But being the hustler that I was, I told God, I called myself making a deal with God. I said,
okay,
if nobody gets hurt, I will stop hustling. But if you want me to stop getting high, you got to take it. The next day, my friend got out of that problem without anybody getting hurt, anybody going locked up. I had a going out of business sale, and I've not gotten high since. And that was the beginning of me getting here today.
Okay.
And that's the answer to the question.
Now, John, okay, so let's fast forward because we're coming towards the close here. 7 years later, after that incident, you're transferred to the Corrections Transition Program.
The Parole Commission transferred me there.
Right. And Dr. Sheeran in the Corrections Transition Program changed you. You were paroled from Florida on November 10th, 2009.
Correct.
You were transferred to California, and
Right.
you served
3 years, 3 months, 3 days.
in California.
Correct.
And then you're out. They send you back to Florida.
February 13th, 2013, I went to back to Fresno because it took me 10 months to get the paperwork straight. And then on December 13th, that same year, I returned back to Florida. And
Right.
actually, that same night, I went to the Corrections Transition Program for one of our banquets.
Let me ask you this question. What are the challenges that you have faced with your own transition since you've been out?
I think one of the most remarkable things, when you're in a situation, your greatest currency is a certificate with your name on it. I did this, I did that. And I had to accumulate, I think it was somewhere around 170 of them. I prepared myself better than most. I'm not a genius, but I know I have above average intelligence. I've seen the scores. I have a greater support group than most. So I just knew I was ready to be a free man. The day I got picked up, we went to a Panera Bread to get something to eat. And I was told, what would you like to get? I looked at the menu. It's almost like I saw the words run together. I said, you pick me something. You can have whatever you want. You pick me something. I was scared of the menu. We stopped at a McDonald's on the way to the place.
Right.
I got a milkshake. He says, you want to pay for it? I look at that cash register. I'd never seen one like that before. I says, no. And I can go on and on, things like that while I was having I was less prepared for the changes in society than I thought I was.
John, we've got a couple of minutes left, so I want to talk about, you're giving back. A big thing with the Corrections Transition Program is giving back to society. And I know that you worked with Dr. Sheeran at the Alpha Phi Sigma.
Correct.
You've written you've written a few books. You're very active also with the Ephesians. Talk about how you're giving back to society now that you're out and that you are becoming an asset of the community.
Well, the crazy thing is that as I was preparing to come back, they realized they needed a secretary to fill a certain role for Alpha Phi Sigma, another organization that Dr. Sheeran runs, the National Criminal Justice Honor Society. And Dr. Sheeran gave me a chance to fill that role. And I actually worked there for the first 5 years. But I went in every Tuesday night with Dr. Sheeran back into the prisons to see the same men in our program. In time, I acquired my PIN number, which allowed me to go to every prison in the state. So I do prison ministry. I go share in chapel sometimes. Now I actually go to Sago Palm Reentry every Monday. I was there yesterday. I teach a class there. I'm one of the prison ministry volunteers. But I'm also, 2 years ago, I became the residential director of Anchor House, a Christian transition program, otherwise known as a halfway house in Lake Worth, Florida. And even before then, we put together a ministry called Ephesians 4:28 Ministries. Now, if you wonder what Ephesians 4:28 is, it's a scripture from the Bible. It says, let him who stole steal no more, but rather let him labor with his hands, so he'll have something to give to those in need. So I made that my goal to be that person. Mike and Alan are board members. They helped me from the beginning with that. Now, actually, some very new news. The organization that is supervising Anchor House now wants our ministry to be the one to take it over, and we're in a process now coming to an agreement. So by the end of this year, our ministry may be the sole operator of this transition program.
Right.
Wow, how inspirational!
Very, yeah. Talk about changing his life.
I mean, it's unreal. The guy's a whirlwind. He's a Houdini to start with. I mean,
young, dumb, and stupid.
But I tell you, I don't know how stupid you are, my friend. I don't know about that part, but I think you're old and smart now.
I got tired of beating my head up against the wall. I'm going to keep my promise. I'm never going to give credit where it isn't due. God help me get to this point. I'm not going to take you to church, but that's the truth. But also have great support groups. Here's part of it right here. Chris played an integral role, as did Dr. Sheeran and so many other people. I have a great family. I'm so grateful that I realized that there was a point in my life I said, if I could have one thing, if I had one choice, what would it be? It wasn't that I got out of prison. It was that I got out of prison when my parents were still alive. That happened. My dad passed away last year. I was able to be there at the funeral. I'm there with my family. My mother's still alive. I've reunited with my family. That's worth more than gold.
Right.
So.
Very well. Well said. Andy, any final words on today's show?
Well, I all I can say is this guy is an inspiration, and talk about being a productive member of society. I mean, he goes well beyond that with all you're doing today. And I guess if I, knew you in the 80s or the 90s, I'd probably think that would never happen. It would be impossible for that to occur. But, God bless you. You've really made an incredible life for yourself, and you are fortunate that you were able to get out and reunite with your family and be there for them and your parents in their elderly years, the way they are. Your mom's still alive, so it's inspirational to me. I mean, that's the word that comes to mind. It really is an inspiration.
I want to say something. We spent a lot of time talking about all the crazy stuff I did, and I just realized it builds up interest. A lot of things that did happen in my life,
right?
And I understand how we got kind of carried away with it. I'm not proud of that. I want everybody to know I am not proud of that. And I realized that even though I did not physically hurt anybody, I did hurt people. And it goes beyond the immediate victims or my family. There's other people. There's the ripple effects. It goes on and on. And a part of me wish we hadn't spent that much time. I wish we spent more time talking about how life has gotten better and what we're doing. But I am pleased that I do have this opportunity. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to tell people about it. I want people to have hope in their families. It can happen. If it can happen with me, it can happen with anybody.
Well said, John. Well said. Thank you for coming to our show today, and we hope you can come back in the future.
Thank you so much.
I hope so.
I'm grateful for this opportunity.
I want to thank all of you for tuning in to another episode of Men Going Home. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, please share this episode and ask your friends to share this episode, because we do want to spread the word about men going home. And we'd like to thank you so much for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.